All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being a part of the NACC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion first event. Our title today is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Time of COVID-19. Again, my name is Kimberly White. I am the chair of this committee. Our committee's tagline is to educate, empower, and embrace. We're going to educate you about why DE&I is important, provide you ways to empower your teams to cultivate a diverse and inclusive environment within your organization in an effort to strengthen company culture, and to encourage you to embrace all aspects of DE&I and see it as a valuable benefit for employees, clients, and customers alike. The DEI committee has been working behind the scenes to put this event together, and I want to thank them for all of their hard work and would like to acknowledge a few of them by name. Our program chair, Nate Alberti, our moderator, Mina Banziak, and program member, Peggy Mcguire, who will provide today's closing remarks. Today's expert panelists, Gina Stewart, Tasha Cruzat, and Mike Isaac, will address how businesses, nonprofits, and corporations can restore operations through a DE&I lens and reemerge stronger than before. As I've often stated, DE&I should be at the forefront of what we do, the norm, if you will, and not an afterthought. At this time, please join me in welcoming the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Kaylin Risvold, to share a few thoughts. Kaylin, I want to thank you for your leadership and commitment to the community, to this committee, and to DE&I. Kaylin?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Kim, for chairing the inaugural DEI committee. This was an idea I had talked about through my interview process in the fall. My first day as president and CEO was October 24th. It was important to me to get this committee up and running, and I think we got this up and running in January. So the turnaround was fast and crazy, and I appreciate you all jumping in. This is a group of people who are incredibly passionate, and passionate people change the world. So that's what we're going to do, a little bit at a time, just again, working to educate, empower, and all of that. So I really appreciate you all tuning in and listening about this very important topic. And I'm going to kick it over to our moderator, Mina Badashek. Mina actually just won our 4 Under 40 award at the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce. So very excited. We just shot an NCTV video. So that will be coming up soon, so you can learn a little bit more about her, but really excited. She went through Leadership Naperville and has been involved in the community, and excited to see her on this committee as well as everybody else. And I will kick it over to you, Mina, to start our discussion. Let's get into it.
Thank you very much, Kaylin and Kim, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today. I have the really great honor of introducing you to our distinguished panelists. And, as Kim was explaining at the beginning, in organizing this event, the Chamber's DE&I committee wanted to have an open conversation about the potential disparities and inequalities and burdens that are faced by some populations right now, and how they've become more starkly exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And being in a place right now where many organizations are in the midst of devising plans to reopen and perhaps are looking at functioning very differently than they ever have before, the committee views this to be a pivotal opportunity to examine existing gaps in DEI awareness and policy, and to make intentional changes for the better. So as we explore this topic of restoring business operations through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have 3 guests who have very graciously agreed to share their experience, insights, and recommendations with us. First, I'd like to introduce to you Tasha Cruzat, who is the Executive Director for Voices for Illinois Children, which is an independent child advocacy organization. She previously held a number of significant leadership positions with the Cook County Board and the Illinois Governor's Office and state agencies, and has worked with multiple nonprofits as an executive and as a board member. She's a veteran of the U.S. Navy and brings more than 25 years of experience in the public and private sectors of education, business, and government. Tasha, thank you for joining us today. Mike Isaac is the CEO of Third Party Pet, which provides specialized business services and solutions to the pet industry, ranging from franchise development and customer relations to contracts, negotiation, brand management, and inside sales. He is a frequent speaker, trainer, and consultant, a member of the City of Naperville's Financial Advisory Board, and is involved with the Naperville JCs, the DuPage Children's Museum, and several other local nonprofits. Mike, welcome to the panel. And Gina Stewart is the Director of Diversity, Strategy, and Programs at Walgreens Boots Alliance. She has over 20 years of leadership experience in human resources, including regulatory compliance, HR strategy, and diversity and inclusion. In her current role, she is responsible for developing and integrating enterprise-wide D&I strategies into business operations, focusing especially on talent acquisition, employee engagement, and culture transformation. Gina, we are so pleased to have you. So to kick off our discussion with these three wonderful people who are doing very hard work in this area, I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists to share with us what you have learned about diversity, equity, and inclusion within your respective organizations during the COVID-19 pandemic. So specifically, what are some of the DEI highs and lows that you've discovered? And Gina, would you please start things off and let us know what your thoughts are on that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk to all of you about diversity, equity, and inclusion from my perspective, coming to you from Walgreens Boots Alliance. As you all know, Walgreens has remained open throughout the COVID pandemic. We are considered an essential business, and we have kept our doors open and running, taking care of our customers and the communities that we serve. We do over 8 million customer experiences, we call them, within any given day, and that's either through customers coming into our stores or utilizing our online presence or actually through a mobile app. So we have a lot of customer interactions, and we've kept our doors open and running as a vital business during this time. I think what we've learned and what I've learned and been really pleasantly happy about is that, Walgreens has had a D&I program, for over 10 plus years within the organization. And over the last couple of years since I've been there, we've really been driving, embedding diversity and inclusion into the overall operations of the business, so it doesn't feel like this separate program or list of extras that you have to do within the organization. We've really tried to get it into our people processes as well as into the business processes. And that became, how we're doing became clearly evident during the COVID crisis. We actually saw the company pull D&I into the task force that's really looking at how our operations needed to shift and change to make the way we're working right now and the way we are keeping our stores open for our customers and providing product through our distribution centers, making sure those operations remain functioning, but how do we make sure that we are taking care of our employees and our customers and communities through the ways that we are now working. The safety component first and foremost. And to not have to knock on the door and say, I want in to be part of that discussion, but to just having those doors wide open, to having the D&I team sit in on those meetings, and in particular, the head of diversity and inclusion for the company sit in on that task force, has really been a great opportunity for us to gauge how we are being experienced and accepted within the organization. you know, our company has over the last couple of years really put a focus on making sure that dignity and respect is pivotal in how we not only treat our employees, but how we treat all the customers and the suppliers and the communities upon which we service. In order to do that, you have to have a real strong inclusive lens in your organization. And we have made diversity and inclusion a driver of many of our business operations. So leadership, inclusive leadership has been something that we've been driving throughout the organization. And it's not only something that we're applying to how leaders show up, but it also applies to how all of our employees are showing up around creating this inclusive culture where everyone, regardless of their difference, feels accepted and valued and allowed to contribute and have their voices heard in the conversations of the day, regardless if it is about improving on a business process, how do we go to market in putting out a new product or just branding something that we're putting out there for the company. So we have been driving creating that much more inclusive culture where our team members have a voice and everyone has a voice in some of our processes. And we've utilized that during this time now. So as this task force has restructured how to keep our stores safe for our customers and our employees, we've also realized that our team members who are closest to the customer and to the community also have ideas around how we can do this better. And we've had open channels to allow that to happen and making sure that we are constantly creating broad enough programs right now that that would be inclusive to other thoughts and ideas coming into that. So that's one of our key learnings is that D&I and the programs that we've been and the work that we've been pushing has now really shown up well within our organization. Not that it's perfect and we still have a lot more work to do, but it's really it's got some roots now, and then we're really, really excited about that. But we've also seen too that there are some—
That's great, Gina.
Oh, great. Am I running out of time? I should probably say one more thing and then I'll pass the baton. We've also though realized that there are managers and leaders within the organization that have not fully embraced some of the concepts around diversity and inclusion that we've been driving within the organization. And those leaders are especially struggling with staying connected and driving engagement of employees, especially those that are not in the stores, but those that are sitting in the corporate environment who are now no longer, you know, sitting in offices where leaders can go up to you or managers can go up to you and work with you that way. But now that we're dispersed and we're sitting remotely, some leaders are struggling with those inclusive leadership types of behaviors and actions that others who have been much more embracing of them are not seeing those same kinds of issues with keeping their teams engaged and well informed.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a point that we might come back to eventually during this conversation around the difference between being boots on the ground and being engaged and really connected with all the various voices in your organization as compared to when you're in a corporate environment or stuck behind a desk, so to speak.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Gina. How about Mike? Could you share your version of highs and lows from your perspective at Third Party Pet?
Sure, Mina. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Again, I'm Mike Isaac with Third Party Pet. We're located on the north side of Naperville, and we have approximately 100 team members. Well, you know, honestly, we've learned a lot. As Mina mentioned, since 2011, our team at Third Party Pet has developed and manages contact center programs that assist our clients and their consumers with their pet needs. One of our largest clients is the American Kennel Club, to which we assist retail consumers with their registration needs. We've learned a lot about our team. That's really, to be frank with you, we've learned that they are agile and nimble and navigating into new challenges. Because of the demands of our industry and being in a contact center, Over the last 2 months, we've had to operate honestly through some of the highest level of call volumes and inbound contacts that we've seen in the past 10 years. Our team members not only had to convert to a new model, but they also had to do it while their workload increased as well. That said, we had to recognize that each team member within our organization has a very unique situation. Because of the pandemic, converting to a work from home, schools, daycares closing, our team members' work from home life honestly meshed overnight. We had to allow for a lot of flexibility and understanding with schedules and family needs. Additionally, we realized that there could be a lot of anxiety over the unknown, and that resonated very differently by each individual person. So what we looked to provide was assurances and support of what we could do through regular internal communication and updates, as well as reminders about programs that we offer, such as our EAP program, which is our Employee Assistance Program. Honestly, Mina, I would say the item that I learned the most at the end of the workday is that all of us have different emotional needs. And during the times that challenge us the most is when we often see the character that resides inside of us. I've learned that taking 5 minutes at the beginning of some of our Zoom meetings or our video conferences just to ask how their family is adjusting or what we can do as a company to help them has been one of the keys to understanding the different needs of each team member. I regularly post on our company-wide video announcement page, which is an internal page to TPP employees. And I usually end the exact same way, and I mean it sincerely. And I tell each one of the team members, going through this pandemic, which is new, uncharted territory for all of us, that it's important that we're always kind, be patient, and be understanding. And honestly, that's probably some of the most notable items that we've learned throughout this whole process. And, to be frank with you, Mina, it's really kind of an ebb and flow. And new things happen every day, new announcements happen every day. And as a company in the contact center environment, we're here for our consumers and here for our clients. And quite frankly, all of them are home. So therefore, the call volume has been higher than we've ever seen before. And it's a balance between managing the business, managing our emotions, and then, figuring out what this whole work from home and commingling of let's call it new normal will look like.
Yeah, that's terrific insight, Mike. Thank you. I was hearing some parallels between what you shared and what Gina said, largely in how important it is still to enable that personal connection as you look for ways to return to operation and to make a safe space or a safe environment for individuals to express their concerns and feel like their concerns are being met. Thank you. Tasha, what's your perspective?
So I just want to say a little bit about a disclaimer that was not mentioned in the beginning. So we are Voices for Illinois Children, powered by the YWCA, and we were recently acquired by the YWCA. And so I wanted to make that distinction because we have the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, and then we have Voices for Illinois Children. So I'm going to talk from two perspectives, as a new program of the YWCA, and then also what we have done to really institutionalize DEI. But I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin because you certainly have to talk about REI, which is race, ethnic, and inclusion, if you're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I just want to kind of really set the context there. I've been with Voices for about 4 years, and prior to coming to Voices, there wasn't really a diversity plan, right? All the work that was typically done was primarily by policy analysts who were not people of color, right? And so there were always good intentions of how do we serve all of the kids, no matter what zip code they live in, but it was also an issue of you have to kind of practice what you preach, right? And part of that is to really build a very strong, diversified workforce. And so when I came on as the first person of color to lead a policy organization, and I will tell you that if you look at child advocacy organizations around the country, you won't see a lot of folks of color at those tables. It's really dominated by white America. And so when we talk about these policies, you certainly have to have people of color at the table, because those are mainly the folks that we're serving. So I really want to kind of take that spin a little bit. So a couple of things, just with my sort of eyes wide open coming into the YWCA, Dory McWhorter, who is a fantastic, fabulous, amazing leader, has done a terrific job of having a completely diverse and very talented staff. And it exudes through the work that they do. I witnessed firsthand that no matter, where our clients, no matter what zip code they live in, when the pandemic, when the COVID-19 pandemic surfaced, it was basically all hands on deck. And how do we really identify those that are most in need? How do we get to those folks first? So seeing that firsthand was truly amazing. So I feel like the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago has really got its house in order. Another aspect that came up actually this morning was this talk about how do we re-emerge the current, and we were talking specifically about early childhood, because that's one of the services that, and I apologize for the background noise. That's one of the services that the YWCA delivers, is that they are really immersed in the early childhood education. But the team prepared a guide for how do child care providers, how will they be able to reemerge back into the industry? So they created this fantastic document that is really sort of a helpful guide for them to get back into serving, their clients. And one of the things that we talked about is, how do we put that DEI lens to the reemergence, right? To how do we now, all the lessons that we've learned, all the resources that we couldn't get, but that are now getting and that we still need to get, how do we train the staff? How do we also pass that information on to child care providers? I think was really a huge thing. The other thing is that, I think I also saw firsthand in terms of how the staff was very sensitive in terms of being able to get the right, understanding who they're serving, but getting the right resources in the hands of our clients, who are mainly people of color, right? And so I think that that's really an important aspect to understand who you are serving. And I'm really putting my nonprofit hat on in terms of, you got to understand who you're serving and what their needs are to be able to give, quality service. So now I just want to kind of take a little bit of a twist and turn to talk really more about voices and kind of, how we got our how we kind of really pivoted through this whole coronavirus. So I want to first mention, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the racial impact note legislation that is out here now. Last year, we were instrumental in helping to secure the passage of what is called SB 1485, which is the racial impact note. And the racial impact note would require that an agency or a statement at the request of a legislator or a commission to be able to request if a bill would have further impact on people of color. And this is really a very different kind of bill that is really sort of being stirred up now in the House, that it's passed the Senate, it's now in the House, and it's kind of waiting to be passed. But it's really saying that, we've got to really take a look at who we're serving, collect the demographics on our clients, and make sure that we are not creating policies and practices that will cause further disparity, whether it be in housing, criminal justice, college funding, any of those areas. And so, if this bill is passed, it would be the second probably broad-based racial impact note in the country. A couple years ago, Connecticut passed the racial impact note, so it's very valuable. And I bring this up specifically to talk about changing the hearts and minds of people. The racial impact note is certainly a hard piece of legislation to get through. It's going to take some time, but it doesn't mean that we stand still and not do the things that we need to do to talk about how do we have policies and practices that are not discriminatory. How do we hire a diverse workforce, and how do we have HR policies and practices embedded in what we do? And so I joined with the board chair, Krista Markgraf, to put together a charter. And the charter for our organization basically says that we pledge in our policies, our practices, whether we are hiring people in our programs, that we will use an REI lens. And we also talk about how do we continue to diversify the staff, knowing that the child advocacy world and the policy world is mainly Caucasian people who are kind of really driving it, right? How do we sort of really build that pipeline? And so to reinforce that message, because before we joined with the YWCA, we were very small shop. And if I didn't say in the beginning what we do, we are a child advocacy organization that does public policy and fiscal investments in children. And so we collect data on children and their families. We receive a large, a substantial size grant from the NACC Foundation, where we are charged with collecting data from the Census Bureau and then also from the state agencies, and being able to produce that data, make it available free to the public. And so I will, if anybody wants to email me and find out how to get to that Kids Count portal, I am happy to guide you there. But in any event, we wanted to make sure that that we ask folks to share in our quest in REI and DEI by asking the Senate to approve a resolution to say that the government needs to also, take leadership in this. And so with the help of Senator Kimberly Lightford, we were able to pass a resolution last year, and that is Senate Resolution 386, where the Senate pledges to use an REI lens in their policies and practices, and when they're hiring, and when they are thinking about programs. And so that was a very important move to say, how do we at least start changing the hearts and the minds of people? And I think that with this DEI work, and as we talk, as we think about how do we go back out into the world, having been slammed and hit with COVID-19, how do we continue to do this work and use this lens? I think that there is definitely no secret that the coronavirus has impacted people of color. And so it's important that, that we recognize that. Now, one more thing, but before because I know that I rambled, I probably went over my 4 minutes, but I do want to talk a little bit about health equity, because that also plays a role in how we were able to pivot, having seeing this COVID-19 hit people of color. And so prior to us learning about COVID-19, we were working on this health equity report that really talks about the mental and the physical health inequities that are existing in Illinois. And I can tell you that the picture looked absolutely awful. And I think one thing that I truly thank God for is just my push to really get my staff to understand the work that is necessary when you talk about disparities. And so my staff is I have two white males that report to me, and they did a fantastic, phenomenal job of really putting together a report that will be published in a couple of weeks about health equity. But I think one of the important things is that when this coronavirus came up, we were able to quickly pivot, my team and I, to say, how do we now highlight the inequities that will be further exacerbated by the COVID-19? And I think that that's very important. And so from my standpoint, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's also about getting your staff ready, no matter what color they are, to be able to deal with whether you are a for-profit or a nonprofit, but how are you going to move forward? How do you now get your mindset and ready to serve? And I think that is a very, very important thing from a leadership standpoint, of making sure that you do that. So it's not just through, your practices of, hiring folks and making sure you have people of color, making sure that you're sensitive, but understanding who you are serving is going to be very important, and understanding what the climate looks like post COVID-19. So
Thank you, Tasha.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. So there's a lot of content you shared there. That's really great for us to kind of continue to expand on. One of the phrases that you used was specifically around reemerging with that DEI lens, and your very important comment that the workforce itself, does it reflect the same diversity among the people who are reaping the benefits of the services that your organization provides, and are your services reaching those people who need it the most? So as we try to provide some actionable insight to the folks who have joined us today, the question I want to ask each of you now is, what is one thing that really shows up in your reflection on the time that we've spent here dealing with this pandemic that is distinctly different about how you're applying that DEI lens as you re-emerge? Something very distinct about your operation that you look at very differently now in accommodating that type of that perspective around DEI. Mike, if you were to give that some thought, what is specifically different about the way that you have revised your operating model that now accounts for something with respect to DEI differently?
I'm going to unmute here. Sorry about that. Mina, this is actually something we discuss quite frequently, almost every day now. TPP has always proudly embraced DEI. And the question now is, how do we convert that same culture and camaraderie that we had in an office setting where we had folks right next to each other now to a virtual one, and to one where you can't just walk down the hall, you can't read necessarily facial expressions throughout the day. So our plan is to provide every opportunity to our team members to have open and honest communication with us for what they need. We took a page out of the Great Places to Work certification process, an achievement that we've been honored to receive for the past several years, and are implementing regular employee surveys to help us adjust previous programs that just don't translate to this new norm, but also devised and rolled out new ones based on what our employees want. Our goal in this new environment is to provide transparency and opportunity for two-way communication in order to keep all aspects of our culture in the forefront. We've learned quite a bit through these surveys that we have put out, and a couple of things that are incredibly important as you think about putting out surveys to your team members. And one thing is that no matter what the response is from your team members, you have to have some action plan from it. You have to either implement if it is an item that fits within the business strategy, and or at least respond to it. I'll tell you a quick story on one of ours. We had a survey that we put out, and as I mentioned earlier, beginning part of March, home life, school life, work, everything really just kind of became one thing overnight. And it became one thing overnight for all of us. And in our survey, we asked multiple questions. And one of the fill in the blanks was, what do you dislike the most about your work from home environment? And oddly enough, we had a almost a similar response from I wouldn't call it a majority, but a large portion of them, where they said that the thing they disliked the most was their kids at home during their workday. And when I made that comment a moment ago about some things that may not fit within the business strategy, for third-party pet, obviously, we can't really develop a solution for helping with these, let's call them co-workers that are now in their new work setting. But what we were able to do was disseminate articles and information about how to cope with that and how to cope within your new environment, and understand that, this may be the new norm for whatever period of time it is. We started this at the beginning of March, and we all went into this thinking, okay, it's going to be 14 days. Now it's going to be 20 days. And now it's going to be a month. And what we've had to really learn is that this is the new norm, and this is where we're shifting towards. And our employees not only have needs, but their families have needs as well. And us as an organization, getting that feedback from them and helping in any ways that we possibly can. It may not necessarily be ways that we can change the model of the business, but it may be information, resources, or other ways that we can provide content to help them through this.
That's fantastic. I really like the idea of surveys, that's one of those vehicles where you really do present that safe environment for everyone to contribute their insight, their perspective, their opinion, and even better when you're able to act on those suggestions or concerns that they're voicing. I want to take that opportunity to ask a question of Gina. And before I do that, just a quick reminder to everyone who's on the call today. Please do feel free to submit questions if you have any that you'd like for us to pose to our panelists. You could just do that by typing them right in the chat box. So as we think about this notion of being inclusive, creating a safe environment to collect opinions and suggestions, there are challenges that come through when you get people to be honest about what they're struggling with. So Gina, do you have an example you can share about how you've empowered the people that have brought those challenges to light by providing that active voice at the table to actually be part of that solution? Has there been someone, an individual or a team, who's really risen up during this time to present a really unique solution to a problem that has arisen?
Oh boy. So I will just speak in general terms at this point, and as I'm thinking, maybe a specific example will come to mind. But within our stores, we've embedded a process by which we've encouraged our store teams, employees and management within stores who are sitting closest to the customer, to basically try to solve for the issue with the customer before it has to roll outside of the store and that environment all the way up to a corporate person who then has to try to solve for it. So we want to keep that really close to the customer. The closest people to the customer have the greatest insights into that customer need and to that community need that they're serving. So, there's actually a program that's been built out around this, and we have really encouraged across all of our store formats to make sure that we are pushing that way of solving customer problems and rewarding employees who bring forth these ideas and ways of looking at the situations differently. Now, can every single idea be implemented or solution be implemented? No, but that feedback is always provided. And in many cases, and I think in actually most of the cases, we really look at what that employee is recommending. And even if we have to take parts of it and apply it to the solution, we will. And we make sure that we go back and we recognize employees for being willing to have ideas, bring forth, these innovative ways of looking at solutions for customers. And again, you have to have some kind of recognition in place in order to keep people fully engaged and being willing to step forward, because that is what we're trying to drive. In our diversity and inclusion program, one of the key things that we're trying to get across is that, and all of the studies have shown, if you really utilize diverse and inclusive principles within your organization, you will drive innovation. And that should help any company continue to be competitive and put forth the best solutions and offerings for their customers out there. So we really try to tie that back to we try to put in recognition, because we want that behavior to be sustained. We want our employees to speak up. We hear all the time. I'll give you an example. So, you know, Walgreens is in every community, as I spoke about, and we understand that there is, we know from all the reports that are coming out that Black and Brown people are being really disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And, you know, our employees in these communities, our leaders in these communities are speaking up about this, and we're looking at ways. And I think our leader for Walgreens was actually on one of the morning news shows, and he spoke about this issue, and that the company is putting in and will be putting forth ways of addressing this from our perspective, and you know, in the communities that we service. So more to come there, but we're trying to stay in touch. We utilize our employees. We utilize our business resource groups, which are you know, constituencies inside of our employment that represent different racial and ethnic diversities, different interests. And these groups have also begun to come forward with ideas on how the company may want to think about and address some of these issues that are happening within certain communities that we service. So there's a lot of ways that we're pulling and asking for that information, and for folks to speak up, and looking at ways of taking that and implementing that into new ways into new policies or new programs that we think help within those communities. So yeah, the more you recognize and you ask for voices to be heard, and you show that you value that and you reward that type of behavior, the more you're going to get that groundswell and be able to really, I mean, your employees have a lot to say, especially those that are closest to the customers and the communities. And if you're not tapping into that, if you're not giving them a safe space and asking for that feedback and rewarding that type of behavior, then you're really missing out. Because, you know, us sitting here in corporate, you know, we can build out a lot of policies and programs, but without having, you know, the input of our employees, a lot of times that just falls flat. So
yeah,
so they're a knowledge of
terrific
information.
advice. That's terrific advice. I think it's very accessible for any organization to act on that, because you're showing that you, like you said, really value the voices of the people that are working for you and closest to the customer who to whom you're providing your services. So it sounds like the three of you do have a lot of experience working with these concepts, but it may be the case that not every company out there really even has a written DEI program or goals or resources dedicated to it. So Tasha, this is a question I wanted to pose to you. In thinking through the recommendations that Gina and Mike have shared, what advice do you have for those organizations out there to establish a program if they don't yet have one, or make that pledge like you've referred to, where there is legislative action that's also at play? What's that first step look like?
Sure. You know, I think, you know, first of all, I am happy to share our charter with all of you. And so I can provide my email in the chat box. I think second, I do want to take a moment to echo what Gina said about applying the DEI principles and how that drives innovation, because that is a very important aspect, and part of that is having good communication with your whole organization. And so I say this as a backdrop to identifying what those principles look like, because if you don't know it, it's okay. I think that there's a point where everyone has started from scratch, and that they're trying to figure out what are the best practices, who is a great model, what are some of the other companies or nonprofit organizations that you can visibly say that, oh my goodness, I can tell that they practice, that they have some kind of DEI program going on, and adopt some of those principles. But it's important to also get the feedback as you are building that from your staff or from your employees. And so having that voice at the table and allowing folks to weigh in, I think is going to be very critical as you put together that, whether it's a charter, whether it's your principles, your company values. You got to get that buy-in, and you have to get folks being co-authors with you, because I didn't do it alone. I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to go ahead and draft this charter out. I had lots of input from staff, from partners, from other organizations. I had experts vetted. I had people who had written statements to give feedback. I adopted language. And so you certainly don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you must have an inclusive environment to allow people to weigh in on what that should look like. Because if you want them to buy into that DEI culture, they have to be a part of drafting it. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
makes no sense of doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Tasha, do you think that there's anything at play that holds an organization back from taking that first step, or with any of the challenges that we face right now, what holds us back from moving forward with positive action?
I think part of it is understanding what DEI is, right? I think that is certainly something that is, people see it's a buzzword and it sounds good, DEI, and then we do, but I think that truly understanding it and taking time to self-educate and ask, and guess what? If you fumble, it is okay, because that's part of the whole learning process. And so if you sound stupid, if you think you sound stupid, you're not. So don't ever. But I think that's truly an important aspect. But I think understanding what that means is going to be important. So the more professional development that you can have around that you can get your staff involved in, I think is going to take you a long way. And it's a whole process, and it's definitely not something that is going to occur overnight. You're not going to wake up and say, I'm going to have a DEI plan, I'm going to write it up, I'm going to type it, I'm going to put it out. There's definitely steps to all of this, but I think the important thing is understanding what it is, and also understanding, being real with your own biases, right? So we all have biases that we think that we don't have, just because, like, I'm a person of color doesn't mean I don't have a bias, right? That's kind of crazy, right? So I think that you just have to identify what that is. Self-reflection is also encouraged. I think that you should encourage that to your staff, to do some self-reflecting, and then sort of asking them, what is it that, what don't they understand about DEI, and then how can they become to be more inclusive, right? I think those are the questions that you have to start reflecting and thinking about, and caring about. But I think definitely also you got to start building that into the culture too, because it's one thing of saying it, but if you don't build it into the culture, you're not going to get folks to have a change of heart or change of mind, or make some improvements, some improvements, and to be able to be contributory to the organization's DEI framework.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question here we've got from the audience, which I think is a great segue at this point, because you're talking about culture change and behavioral change, reflecting on internal biases that might exist. So I know, Gina, you mentioned this as well, that you've been doing a lot, and Walgreens has been doing a lot to embed inclusiveness or embed DE&I within the organization. So it doesn't feel like it's a separate program or extra work. What are some specific actions that different businesses or organizations can take that would lead toward that embedding of inclusiveness into the culture?
Great question. So one thing is, when you think about training and you think about your management level at first and getting that buy-in and a clear understanding of DEI, we call it in our space diversity and inclusion, but equity is clearly built into that. You might want to think, how do all of your development programs that you have out there, what kind of diversity and inclusion lens has been added to those programs? And we went ahead and we took a look at that. We have several different levels of leadership development programs out there. And we realized that, it's not clearly called out, it's not clearly embedded. So we actually began to work with the creators of those programs and that content. A lot of the content is, you learn about the business, you learn all about all of the different divisions within the company and how they operate. So how do you begin to look at it with that lens of inclusion and how we go to market? How does inclusion and diversity show up in that discussion around how do we look at our marketing programs and how we brand ourselves and our communities? Again, it's just part of how we want people to start thinking about diversity and inclusion. So looking at ways of making sure that you can show how diversity and inclusion adds values to all aspects of your training and development for your leaders and for your employees. Things like, let's see what else we did. So learning and development, talent acquisition. So when you go out and you're looking to hire new people, we right now are at a point where we're trying to make hiring for diversity just a part of what we do. And we're still not there yet. We have some things in place that we are utilizing to make sure that as you bring diverse talent in for interviews, that you have gone out and you have cast that broader net and you're bringing diverse talent to the table. We want to get to a point where I don't have to say we have a program and I'm measuring whether or not you're bringing talent diversity onto the interview slate. It's just going to be automatic, that we don't have to remind people you need to make sure that diversity is part of this process. So we're getting there. We're making a lot of progress there, but we still have to measure it right now because we haven't fully got to the point where we're able to not even think about it. It's just smart to go out and bring in diverse talent. It's a pool out there that our customer base, the communities that we're in, they're all diverse. So why do we have to keep reminding ourselves that we need to bring diverse talent into, and we have to be so conscious of it, we should be almost on automatic that is just part of how we operate. So we're getting better, but we're not quite there. So we had to start by really beginning to measure that and showing that that's not happening as often and as frequently as it should be. So,
Sure.
So those are just some of the examples. You really have to begin to embed it into your processes.
Sure. Thank you. Mike, do you have some examples that you can share as well?
I do. Thank you, Mina. I appreciate you calling on me. I saw the comment over to the side from Rick Lochner asking about this. Rick, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. One example is having an employee-led program whose goals and mission encompass the DEI principles that integrate that into a part of the employee enrichment and overall culture. Obviously, also important that there is some level of executive oversight or sponsor to the team, but really making sure that it is an employee-led team. at TPP, we have such a team. This team's called the Culture Crew. And this Culture Crew plays a very important role in our team. It is all employee led. We have an executive sponsor that assists with just direction and mainly advice on how to help execute certain deliverables that the team has chosen to put together. So a good example for this team, with this transition, we gave heavy focus on the continuation of the structure in a virtual model, which quite frankly, a lot of us were spinning on the first day of thinking, oh my goodness, we spent 10 years building this culture that has camaraderie, face-to-face, high fives. How do we move this to a culture where the team is so used to being around, let's say 100 of their other friends throughout the day, and then all of a sudden they're in their bedroom or they're in their home office or wherever they're deciding to work. So there were a few things that were actually pretty simple to do, which would be, moving meetings to video conference, but there were also some few more challenging items that required us to really think outside the box. Our company is primarily a contact center and distribution center. So a few of the very unique creative things that our Culture Crew instituted was a live stream morning yoga. So they do morning yoga before work on our live stream. They also do cooking classes with recipes for healthy eating. And we also utilize this Culture Crew to help increase communication and transparency among some of the decisions that are made as an organization. So one of the ideas that we did was we really utilized this group not only to get feedback into the organization upward, but we also worked with this team to help get communication outward. So, when we talked about how do you embed inclusiveness, it really is making sure they have a seat at the table and make sure they really, quite frankly, run the table.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that grassroots effort really kind of is the common thread among what each of you has shared with us, that it's so important to make DEI itself an inclusive process as you're building those programs and policies. There is another question from the audience that kind of speaks to that. I think it's worth discussing in a little bit more detail. A lot of big organizations end up appointing a person of color as their diversity person and stop there. So what is it that we need to do to go beyond that and be all in, quote unquote, rather than make what ultimately ends up being an ineffective adjustment? So what is that gap between taking that step of bringing someone in and recognizing you need true leadership in this space, and then connecting all the way back down to the front lines and building it from there? What does that look like? I don't know, Mike, is that something that you can speak to a little bit? Is that similar to your approach, or?
I can take this first, and then I may kick it over to some of the other panelists as well. I would say one of the mistakes you can make in any organization is appointing somebody because you think they would want to take the role or want to be able to be the leader of said club or group. And, what I've learned within Third Party Pet over the last 10 years is that it's okay and it's healthy to seek professional advice and professional consultants to come into an organization to help build some of these models. Not every organization has all of the talent within the four walls to build, let's say, a DEI team or a culture crew or whatever you decide to do within your organization. So my best advice would be to look to those folks that have best practices, bring them in from a consultative approach, help build the team. And, one of the best things you can do in an organization is, quite frankly, never really appoint somebody. I find it best to allow folks to raise their hand. You'll find a little bit more of what we call buy-in, and you'll see them take the leadership role a little bit stronger than if you were to just appoint them. I know in my past I've been appointed to certain roles just because I may be a certain ethnicity or whatever the case may be, and allowing them to raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to take this on, or I have the skill set or the talent to do it, would probably be most effective.
Mind if I jump in?
Yes, please do.
So I say, if you're going to do DEI, do it right, and don't just hire the person. If you're going to hire a person of color, they need the support. Give them the tools that they need to do their job. As a person of color, I've experienced, unfortunately, in my position of not being supported when needed to, right? When you are talking about DEI. So it's not just about appointing a figurehead and saying, hey, look, see, we appointed a person of color. We're doing it, yay. But it's like, are you truly doing it? Don't be disingenuous. Support that person of color. Give them the tools that they need. Whatever person is in that position, support them and give them the tools that they need, and not just it be a flash in your mission or your vision or within your principles, but truly make it work. If you're gonna do it right. Do it right or go home.
Yes, thank you. Yep. Gina, did you have any other comments you wanted to share on that one?
I would just state that, this work, diversity and inclusion work, it's not hard. It's not for the, it's very hard. It's not for the lighthearted. And, coming into this role, you have to have some kind of passion for this as well. And diversity comes in many dimensions. So if we think that only people of color or women can lead diversity, we're not thinking about all of the different dimensions of diversity. And normally, when you are a person that has experienced being different or not being part of the majority group, you can bring a perspective, I think, that really lends itself to this work. But it doesn't have to be just a racial or ethnic perspective. There's, people with disabilities make great leaders in this space. The LGBT community, great leaders in this space. So I just want to make sure that we're all, understanding that just because we're talking D&I, we're not just talking race and ethnicity and even gender, because those differences go broader than that. And as you're moving to expand how your company is looking at diversity and inclusion, and hopefully most people are moving beyond just the race and ethnicity and gender perspective, there's a lot of difference out there that is in need of being considered and looked at when it comes to your diversity and inclusion programs. And especially if you're a retailer or an organization that's consumer-based, that's reaching out to everyone, having a broad-based perspective on diversity and inclusion issues is critical if you bring a leader into this space for your company.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. This has been a fantastic discussion, a lot of really wonderful insights shared, and as it turns out, we're already closing in toward the end of our time. So I did want to pose one final question to each of you. If you can give me your 90-second top of the head response. It's a call to action that we're looking for. So for the folks that took the time out of their day to listen to each of you share your experiences, if you could recommend to them one call to action as an outcome of this discussion that we've had, what simple task would you encourage each of us audience members to commit to doing to promote these efforts? Oh, I guess I should ask one of you to go first. Who's going to go first? How about Mike?
Great. I appreciate you having us today. Mina, by the way, you're doing a phenomenal job. I appreciate you moderating.
Oh, thank you.
I would say, throughout this whole process, and we're still learning, this is uncharted waters. I've been managing almost 20 years now, and I've gone through 2008 financial crisis. I've gone through a bunch of different items. This is a whole new game for a lot of us. And I would say learn as much as you can. And the best way that we've learned at TPP, and the one thing that I've learned is my most important role at Third Party Pet as CEO, is to listen. And we've listened through multiple ways of mediums. You can do it through surveys, like I mentioned before. I would also take time to just talk. We're so quick sometimes on some of our Zoom meetings and our video conferences to jump on, let's go to topic, let's look at our agenda, let's fly through items, and let's go to the next one. When in reality, the members of your, let's call them family. These are the people that work with you day in and day out. They have needs and they have ideas, and they're not always things that they may need from you. There may be ideas for the business model. And us as leaders that are on the call, you know, us being in, we're in uncharted territory. So I'll take advice from anybody that wants to say, hey, Mike, have you thought about doing it this way? Or have you considered maybe changing our model, looking at it that way? And, you know, one of the most important things that I learned a long time ago about being a leader is to learn how to listen and gather as much data as I possibly can. And so that would be my call to action. And, you know, listening is in a multitude of different ways, whether it's verbally, via survey, email, text. I would highly recommend that you touch out to as many folks as in your organizations as you can to understand and get some feedback from them.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Mike. We've really benefited from all the experiences and advice that you've shared with us. Gina, how about your 90-second take on a call to action?
So this call to action can start this coming Thursday on May 21st. May 21st is World Day for Cultural Diversity. And Walgreens Boots Alliance, our whole global company, will be acknowledging and celebrating that day from a kind of virtual perspective with communications, events, videos from team members around the globe talking about why cultural diversity is important to them and what it means to them, whether it's from a personal perspective or having it in the work environment. And I would recommend that it really starts with the conversation. It really starts with really learning about differences and how that can broaden your perspective and allow you to connect better with the people that you work with, the people in your community, the customers that come into your establishments, because we are all different, but we're all connected. And the more you can know about someone, the more you can engage in those types of conversations, just getting to understand who they are and where they're from, what's important to them. Having that broader perspective on life and difference is critical if you want to continue to not only grow your business, but learn to live better with each other. And you can start that conversation on Thursday with World Day for Cultural Diversity. It's a UN holiday. It's a UN-sponsored holiday. So if you want to learn more about it, you can just Google World Day for Cultural Diversity, United Nations. And we're actually going to celebrate all the difference we have within our company, from employees, from leader communications, just really acknowledging the day and why it's important for us as a company to make sure that we acknowledge and recognize the difference within our organization and how all of that makes us better and stronger as an organization.
Let's
start
terrific.
there.
Thank you so much, Gina. It's very apparent that you are quite passionate about what you do, and thank you for sharing that with us today. I'm looking forward to Thursday and that first conversation. Wonderful. And Tasha, can you close it out for us, please? What would your 90-second call to action be for the group that's here with us today?
Sure, absolutely. So Mike and Gina, amen to what you said, what they said, actually. So self-reflection is very important. And I think that we've all had a lot of time being isolated to do a little bit of self-reflection. And I ask that people make room in their thoughts of what does their contribution to DEI looks like? What can you do personally to help the cause if you don't have a DEI program or principles? You know, I encourage you to step out on faith, be a trailblazer, and put that in a suggestion box in your company. Suggest as maybe a first step affinity groups that maybe could be formed within your organization. But I just want to I think I want to encourage you just to kind of step out and embrace it. And if you don't know, it's okay. But I think the first part is really putting that self-reflection piece as maybe part of your routine, so that you can figure out what is your contribution. And quite certainly, your work will go a long way. The more that you embrace DEI, I think the more that you can leverage the work that you do and continue to be successful in your work.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much, Tasha. I'm going to hand it off at this point to Peggy Mcguire, who's another member of the Chamber DEI Committee, and she's going to provide some closing remarks to the rest of you. Peggy?
Thank you, Mina. You did a fabulous job. Fabulous. I just want to thank this gifted panelists that we've had today and the brilliant advice that we've heard and remedies, everything from self-reflection to how you employ people, how you have your teams influence policies. It's been enlightening. And I would challenge this group to think about how are you going to implement DEI in your organization based on some of the things that you've learned today, from smaller mid-sized business to large businesses to policy influencers that gave us all of their input today. I would also encourage you to respond to the survey that we're going to put out into your inbox to really help this committee educate, empower, and embrace our city of Naperville. I love that the state of the city, our mayor yesterday really drove home the importance of this work precisely, and not to lose sight of it, make it on the forefront of what we're all doing. And lastly, I wanted to make sure we thank our generous sponsor for this event, Linda Wilhelm. She owns Allegra Marketing and Printing and Mail in Romeoville, and she made this event possible today. So Linda, if you want to give a 30-second commercial, and just thank you so much for everybody's contribution today. I know she's here. I saw her.
Can you hear me? I don't know how. I'm not very good at this. You're out.
It's okay.
Muted?
We hear you.
Yeah. No? Yep. Go on.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thanks a lot for letting me do this. This is a very good experience. This puts me in the middle because I own a small, mid-size company that is growing. So we need to be able to work on this kind of program to keep it going, especially now. But I have to say, my team really pulled together during this time of crisis, and we're doing great.
That's great to hear. And thank you again for this sponsorship. That's inspiring. And lastly, I would just ask that this group push out our information as we roll forward, gathering information on what people need to hear and listening to experts as we've heard people suggest. Please push out our committee meetings and our events as they come down pike through the Naperville Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you for joining, everyone. Stay healthy.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
So good. Thanks, Tasha and Gina and Mike Isaac. We really do appreciate it. Great.
So thankful.
Thank
Yes,
you.
they were awesome. Awesome.